You switched political parties over this issue. Tell us what it was like. I mean, when you got the bill passed, it must have been very exciting.
It would have been very sad if it didn't. It didn't pass. But, school choice is not the only thing that I am passionate about. It's the most important thing to me. I mean, our children are our future. I'm a physical therapist. One day, hopefully, I hope I don't need physical therapy. But if I do, it's going to be one of the children that we're raising up today, right? We need to make sure our children are educated so they can continue to make America thrive. We are failing on so many fronts if we miss that opportunity. But it was a great session for me. We did a lot of things for tax reform. We're lowering people's taxes.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. You know, feeling trapped can lead to hopelessness and a belief that there are no other options. When it comes to education, some families feel trapped in the school that they're zoned for. There are other families that like their zone school, but what about those families that the school fails to meet the students' needs, whether it's due to special needs or not enforcing anti-bullying policies? How's that student supposed to learn? Well, in Georgia this past session, they passed the Promise Scholarship, which will allow students in low-performing schools to have the option to find a learning environment that works for them. Now, last year, we got to talk to Georgia State Representative Misha Mainor, who switched political parties over this issue because she personally benefited from being able to attend a school in a different district. We want to welcome the state representative back to the show to talk about the Promise Scholarship and how it will benefit students in her district. Representative, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. Glad to be back on.
You bet. Now, last time we talked to you, you had just switched from Democrat to Republican. And what was it like this past session being a Republican?
It was the same, except I was in meetings with a different group of people. so different meetings. It was the same.
Yeah, we talked about the reasons why you left the Democrat Party. It really was over this issue, right, of school choice and parental involvement and empowerment in education, right?
Absolutely. I'm really excited that we did get the bill passed. It is, as you said, the Georgia Promise Scholarship. And you said, well, what does that do for my district in particular? The great thing is it's not just my district. It is the entire state of Georgia that can now benefit from all the different facets of the bill. One of the prime examples that I like to give, in my district, we have schools where 2 to 3% are meeting a reading or a math proficiency, right? So that means 97 to 98% of the students are not at the rate that they should be. And so not saying that it is the school administrator's fault, not saying that it is the teacher's fault, and certainly not saying that it is the parent's fault. And we know it's not the child's fault, but the fact is that is the reading proficient level, right? So this says, you know what, mom or dad, grandma, aunt, whomever is taking care of the child, if that school is not meeting your child's needs, because it is only for those children in the lowest performing schools in the entire state. But if the school is not meeting your need, you can now go to another school, just as I did, except this time now it's illegal. When I was growing up, not legal.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. The last time you were on the show, you shared your story about how you kind of benefited from attending a different school. For those who maybe didn't hear that episode, take just a minute and talk about your personal experience and how you benefited.
So I went to Mays High School and Southwest Middle School, and those are not the schools that I was zoned for. we used a cousin's address so I could go to that school. Why? Because back then, I'll be 50 next year, but back then my mom knew that the schools were not up to par in the community that we lived in. And it happens to be the same community that I represent today. The schools have not changed, right? Again, not putting blame on anyone, but instead of me going to a school that was failing, 97 to 98% of the children, she opted to send me to another school. And I like to tell people I may not be sitting here as a state representative today if she did not make that choice. I may not have gone to college and gotten my master's degree in physical therapy if she did not make that kind of choice for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's really something that every child should have, right? Every child should have that ability, and their parents should have that ability to kind of find the best education for them. It's a shame that we lock kids in based on their zip code. This was an opportunity for you to get a better education. But, I don't mean this in the wrong way. You're not special. This should happen to every kid, right? I mean, it should happen to every kid in America should have that same opportunity.
You're right. And I think it's kind of funny. My birthday is May 17th, which is the day of Brown versus Board of Education.
Oh, yeah.
And Brown versus Board of Education back then says every student is entitled. It is your right that the government must provide an adequate and quality education, right? And so up for discussion these days amongst at least people in my district, okay, well, what is adequate? Because if 97% they are failing, is that adequate?
Right. Yeah. And it's not adequate. It might be adequate for the 3%, but if we're failing 97%, we're failing, we're failing Brown versus Board in that decision. So yeah, that's totally right. Let me ask you this. Last year, you were the only Democratic representative that voted for school choice. Were there any Democratic legislators that voted for the bill this session?
There was one bill, Representative Patty Bentley, and she is a distant relative of mine.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's just in our blood that
it runs into DNA, huh?
Yes. And she's from, she represents the Dooley County area, which is where my family traces back to.
Yeah. And so she voted for the bill.
She did vote for the bill, and she received a lot of backlash. But, we're both big girls, if you will. And so we're handling it.
Yeah. But you should at least let her know that you didn't receive that backlash as a Republican. I want to get a little family rivalry going here, Representative. So talk about the bill itself and what it does for Georgia families.
So the bill does a lot more than just help those in the bottom 25%. So it's the bottom 25%. And parents can now take $6,500, which is only state funds, right? I like to give an example. If Atlanta Public Schools per pupil spending is $26,500, right? That $20,000 stays with the school, even though the child leaves. Only $6,500 goes with the child. And so now they can use that in a private school, but also within the bill, we included something called inter-district transfers, which means now you can go to another public school that's not in your zip code as well. Mm-hmm. The example I like to give with that is if you have a parent that lives in my district, but say they work in Gwinnett County, and if you have an elementary age child, you most likely have to get off of work early if you want to go and meet your child when they get home. All people don't have that advantage, but you would like to, right? So now you can enroll your child in, say, a public school that is near your job. That is also a part of the Georgia Promise Scholarship. Something else that it does, we heard from the constituents, and there are not enough pre-K slots throughout the state of Georgia. So we also put something in the Georgia Promise Scholarship that says we'll put $30,000 towards capital costs to start new pre-K programs. As a former daycare owner myself, $30,000 is a lot of money to do a startup cost. So, I mean, I think that that is an excellent opportunity to get some phenomenal new pre-K programs within the state. Something else the Georgia Promise Scholarship does, we now are offering innovation grants. So that program should be up and running, at least the details of it, by the end of this year. And if there's a community school that is doing something innovative, the state will give grant money to implement those programs.
That's great. This must have been, I mean, you've worked on this issue a long time. You switched political parties over this issue. Tell us what it was like. I mean, when you got the bill passed, it must have been very exciting.
It would have been very sad if it didn't. It didn't pass. But, school choice is not the only thing that I am passionate about. It's the most important thing to me. I mean, our children are our future. I'm a physical therapist. One day, hopefully, I hope I don't need physical therapy. But if I do, it's going to be one of the children that we're raising up today. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we need to make sure our children are educated so they can continue to make America thrive. We are failing on so many fronts if we miss that opportunity. But it has been it was a great session for me. We did a lot of things for tax reform. We're lowering people's taxes. We're doing homestead exemptions. We did a big one in my district is the squatter bill, which just puts penalties for people that will not leave out of someone's home that they don't own. So as a new Republican, it's way more than just school choice. There are some fundamental things that I'm excited that I can educate my community on why they should vote for these conservative policies, if you will.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Those all sound like good pieces of legislation. I remember last time we talked, you had said that like all of your family, or I don't want to say all, but maybe I'm overstating it a bit, but most all of your family are Democrats. There wasn't, I mean, everybody loved everybody through it. It sounded like, they didn't disown you because you became a Republican, but have there been some challenges there with you switching parties and your family?
Yeah. So I do think that everybody in my family is a Democrat. There are people in the community and my church that have come to me and said quietly, hey, I am a Republican. No one in my family has come to me and said that. I think the biggest challenge is I'm in a small group chat with my mom and two of my cousins. I have a really small family. And, I do think that some of my cousins like to throw jabs unconsciously into the. So I am learning to ignore their jabs because I do think that, we're in a highly politicized environment right now with election. And so I just have to remember that everyone is entitled to feel the way that they feel. So
yeah, that's a great point. And, you always hope that family will kind of rise above that. And, but you know what? And it doesn't always happen. I was reading today that Wonder Woman, Linda Carter, the old Wonder Woman from many years ago, her sister's running for state legislature in Arizona. And Linda Carter endorsed her opponent, endorsed her sister's opponent. Can you imagine?
That's terrible.
That is terrible. That is terrible. Maybe she's not as wonderful of a Wonder Woman as we thought. But anyway, I mean, it's strange that families have to go through that. It's terrible, but sounds like yours survives it, and people may take jabs. But I've always thought about this as a candidate or as someone as an elected official. That's what the First Amendment's about, right? Is people's ability and right to disagree with you. I mean, they may think you shouldn't have voted for that bill or a different bill or whatever. That's their right to do it. And, it's your responsibility as a legislator to be able to listen to that. You hope it's all constructive and respectful, but that's their right to disagree, correct?
Correct. Which is why I'm not throwing jabs back.
That's right. There you go. That's right. And that's the classy thing to do. Don't throw jabs back. But yeah.
So is giving me an opportunity to educate them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll say something and I'll say, that's not true. And they'll say, well, it said blah, 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 blah. And I will send them information from a reputable site that everyone can agree is factual based, right? I'll send them websites to show that what they're saying is not true, right? And so they never come back and say, oh, but they do stop the conversation.
Yeah. Well,
now,
perfect.
The evidence that, okay, what you're saying is not true.
Right. Well, good.
It's a lot of non-truths going on. And I don't know if you know this, you probably do. In 2026, it is going to be America's 250th anniversary, right? And a survey came out. I can't remember which organization did it, but a survey came out and it's like 30 or so % of people really do not know basic civics. And so that is why we're in this space, because people actually, one, do not know how to go out and authenticate information. And two, we have people that don't know how to read, which is why we're doing the school choice bill. But also the last thing is, if you don't know how your country runs, if you don't know how government works, if you're not actively participating, watching a hearing, has Wonder Woman actually watched Arizona legislative hearing to even know what is happening? So for me, I give people the facts. I show them how to get the facts themselves and say, look, don't believe me. Let me take you to this source and you look at it yourself. But here's the information.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we have so many people that don't care. They just let life pass them by, and they don't understand that they better care about politics, because politics cares about them, right? I mean, it's gonna decide their future, and so they better be a part of it for sure. And let me ask you, what were some of the objections to the Promise Scholarship that were raised by other people?
Well, the interesting thing is the reason the Promise Scholarship became bigger than it was last year is because there was really a bipartisan effort on, okay, what would you like to see in this so you will vote for it? So adding everything that everybody wanted, people still voted no for it. So to say what objections, I think that's a hard question to ask, because it had bipartisan input, but yet they still did not vote for it. But guess what? They'll be using it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the objections I've heard in the past is that it's going to make, it's taking money away from public schools and things. I mean, that's what we hear oftentimes. But look, I mean, unless you have choice in anything, it doesn't just have to be education. I think all the time, I think there's great comparisons between, let's say, veterans, the health care that veterans receive at the federal level through the Veterans Administration. That's very similar to me to school choice and the choice issue. If you have a closed system and veterans can only get their care from the VA hospital, guess what? That care is not going to be the greatest care. And our veterans deserve the greatest care, just like our kids deserve the greatest education. So, there's a movement now to open up the VA to community care to allow other hospitals, just hospitals that anyone can go to, still treat veterans. And veterans should be able to choose if they want to go to the VA system, they can. If they want to go to, a community hospital, they can. Very similar to school choice and education. But my argument is this. I mean, the only way veterans healthcare will improve is if you have competition. And it's the same thing is true in education. Do you agree with my comparison there?
I think it's a great comparison. A lot of things have been in the news of late about, VA care. As a therapist, I've treated lots of veterans. And I think you're absolutely right. Until someone brings to light problems, the VA is now being forced to do something, right?
Right.
I think we're at this precipice for schools where more people have brought the problems to light. And so the system is now forced to deal with the issues that have been raised. When you said earlier your question about what was some of the pushback, I thought you were talking about other legislators.
Oh, yeah. Well, legislators or anyone in the community, whatever. Yeah.
But the biggest one you mentioned is people saying that it's taking money from the schools. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to raise that original point of 20,000, whatever school local tax dollars, those remain with the school, even if the child is gone. So it's actually a net gain. You can't, just because we're taking $6,500 of state dollars, it leaves the other $20,000 plus dollars with the school. So one less student in a classroom, but an extra $20,000 for not teaching.
Yeah, right.
Student.
Yeah. It's actually a benefit to public schools if kids leave the public school system under your bill.
I think it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, right.
I have parents that are not going to be disgruntled because now they're choosing a school that they want to. It comes to people are doing a lot of picking and choosing about how they want taxpayer dollars spent. So I find it kind of funny that local governments spend a lot of money frivolously, right? The example I'm going to give you is Atlanta Public Schools one time, about two years ago or so, did $100,000 luncheon for legislators.
Oh my.
But if you really cared about why are you spending $100,000 on lunch, but you don't want to give a needy family $6,500?
Sure.
Well, that's best for the child. So, I mean,
well, in Representative, I would argue that it's only competition like this bill provides that will stop excesses like that. It will cause public schools to look at it and go, gee, we have to really be good. We have to use our resources wisely. Is it a good use of our money to do $100,000 reception for legislators or luncheon for legislators? Or would this $100,000 be better put into the classroom to teach kids? Those are the things that competition makes you think about. If you don't have competition, then you can easily write a check for a luncheon for legislators for $100,000.
Right. We do have a new superintendent for Atlanta Public Schools. And so I am very hopeful that with the new leadership, he's already making a lot of great changes. So under his leadership, I'm sure we will not see such frivolous spending.
Yeah. Well, I hope that that's the case. Let me ask parents and others. Tell us what have you heard from them after this bill was passed? Have they been reaching out to you?
They have. So a lot of people are upset that it doesn't start until next year. It doesn't start until next year. So that's been the biggest complaint. My district in the entire state of Georgia, I have the most charter schools in my district. So my district is a district of people wanting variety, if you will. People don't like traditional necessarily in my district in particular. And so my constituents are really excited about the interdistrict transfers. For the examples that I gave you, they can put their child in a school. Maybe like one parent, they're going to be enrolling their child into a school by their mothers, so the grandparents' home, so the grandparents can pick them up. So it's a lot of different nuances that people are really excited about. And it's funny, they're more excited about that interdistrict transfer, it seems like, than the 500.
Yeah. And you raised, that example of a grandma being able to pick up their kids and it's more convenient for them. That's just such a great example of why this is important. It shouldn't be a bureaucrat somewhere deciding what's best for a family. It should be a grandma. It should be a mom somewhere who's saying this is best for us. And that's what this is all about, is just kind of empowering parents, empowering, those that know the kids best. And so that's awesome. How do you hope this benefits the state of Georgia in the long run?
In the long run, I would love for Georgia to be one of the highest ranking proficiency school systems in the country. We have great leadership. We have a great group of parents and guardians, and a lot of potential that, is being wasted right now because of, the current situation in the school. So I'm hopeful that with the innovation grants, adding the pre-K programs, Georgia teachers are now the highest paid in the Southeast region with this $10,000 pay raise. I think that we have put a lot of investment towards education, which should bring up our rankings. If we're going to pull out a crystal ball, I want us to be the best. So
yeah,
I want us to be the best.
Well, look, when that happens, and when you look back and you don't have a 3% proficiency and you have, 60 or 70 or 80 or 90% proficiency, it'll be in large part because of you and the others that worked on this legislation and passed it. This is the only thing that's going to really profoundly change for the better education in the state of Georgia. And you were a real leader. You have been a real leader on that. So you'd be very proud. You should be very proud of that.
Thank you for saying that. We also passed some great literacy bills as well. So that in conjunction with the Promise Scholarship should do a lot for the community. Yeah.
Well, Representative, thank you again for joining us. I think you've been obviously a real leader on this issue. I can't imagine how difficult it must be. We talked about this the last time you were on, to change parties. You kind of lose all your friends in a caucus and then have to go make new ones. And that just takes a lot of courage. But I think it sent a message. It helped get this bill passed. And I want to thank you for joining us again and for all your courage and the great work that you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yep. All right. Well, listen, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. We have talked more. We talk more about school choice and educational empowerment and parental involvement in education on this show than we talk about really any other topic. And it's because it has such a profound effect on our society. We've seen the negative. We've seen the negative effects it can have on our society when kids are locked into a school system. They can't get out. It's really a hopeless situation. And it's their life that is changed and altered by that. And so to empower them, to empower parents, is one of the greatest things that legislators can do. And the good representative from Georgia has done a great job on this, as has the governor of Georgia, who signed the bill into law, and so many others who worked hard to make this bill a reality. So thanks to them. Again, we appreciate you being a listener and a viewer to American Potential. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can watch any of these episodes on YouTube. We'd love to have you do that as well. And feel free to send me an email. We'd love to connect you to Americans for Prosperity at any of our state chapters. You can send me an email at jeff@americanpotential.com. Thanks for listening to another episode of American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.